This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is your nutritional cheat code. Pour 1 pack of Athletic Greens into a glass of water, mix it up, slam it down, and you have your daily allotment of vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. You can now, through Wrestling Changed My Life, through this awesome offer, go to athleticgreens.com/WCML, get a 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. athleticgreens.com/WCML, 1-year supply of vitamin D droplets and 5 free travel packs.
I'll just give you a real quick story about Tony. We used to have a rule, cutting weight, you'd have to come in on Mondays, no more than 7 pounds over. And if you were over, every 10th you were over, you have to run an extra lap on the track after practice, after everything was done. Well, over Christmas, he came in 15 pounds over. So 8 pounds over, 8.2 pounds over the 7 pounds. So a Christmas practice is usually a longer practice anyway. Then afterwards, I had to sit there and watch him run 82 laps on a damn track. And Tony didn't exactly break the speed record doing it. He thought I was going to give in.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
If I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wrestling Changed My Life, presented by Spartan Combat. This is your host, Ryan Warner. I've been out of the office for a week, but we're back with our only episode of the week. It's with Mark Hahn, former head coach at Glenbard North High School, one of the dynasties in the Chicago suburbs. Coach Hahn put together an incredible 716 dual meet wins during his time at Glenbard North. 10 times, Glenbard North took third or second at the Illinois Team State Tournament. In 2011, they won the whole thing. And in conference dual meets, they were 127-0 under Coach Hahn's tutelage. He's also coached some of the most known wrestlers in the past generation: Tony Ramos, Austin Gomez, and if you go back a decade before, Joe Gomez and Mike Palazzo, who's now the head coach at Lake Highland Prep. This guy is a legend in Illinois, and I think you'll understand why after you listen to this interview. Fan of the week goes to our friend Try Craig, who left an Apple Podcast review back in June. Don't miss this cast. You'll get the background, the stories, and the excitement is palpable. Excellent interviews that wrestling and the world needs more of. Thank you so much, Try Craig, and anyone listening who's left an Apple Podcast review, we greatly appreciate it. Now let's get to this interview with Mark Hahn. All right, folks, we're here with one of the legends, Mark Hahn, former Glenbard North head coach. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Let's start at the very beginning. Is it true that Glenbard North was built on your father's farmland?
Yes. 40 acres of hay ground that we sold in 1966.
What was a day in the life like for you growing up then?
Pardon me?
What was it like for you growing up then on the farm?
Well, we were a small dairy, so it was a lot of hard work, chores every day. We milk cows 365 days a year, so not a lot of downtime. I really didn't know what a day off was until I started teaching and coaching, and I'd have a Saturday off, and I really didn't know what that was.
You must really be going crazy now then with all this free time you got.
Yeah, I try to fill it up. I still bale a little hay. I still sell some wood. I've got 3 properties right now that I take care of. So it takes some time.
So you're hustling, you're maneuvering still. I like it.
Yeah.
And so, one of the coach, or maybe the only coach before you, Bob Falk.
Correct.
What did he represent to Glenbard North back in those days?
Well, as far as Glenbard North wrestling, he was, he was the first head coach. He was more of a football guy than a wrestler, even though he wrestled at Eastern Illinois, but he didn't start wrestling until he was a sophomore at Eastern Illinois. He had a football scholarship. And he had just taken the head coaching job for football at Proviso West. And he was also coaching wrestling, and Glenbard North just was going to open up, and they wanted him to be the head coach. So he took the job, and he said when he took the job, he wanted to go into a school and make the wrestling program as important as a football or basketball program. And I think that's what he did.
Yeah, and you had said that, as a young guy coming up, did he notice you, and that's how you got hooked into wrestling and were allowed to leave your farming duties?
Yeah, well, my mother worked at the high school too. She was the switchboard operator when they had switchboards, and so he started a once a week Park District program on Saturday mornings, and I was 9 years old, and he talked my mom into me joining that, and so that was my first wrestling experience, the Carroll Stream Park District wrestling club or whatever you want to call it. And Bob had some of his wrestlers, his good varsity wrestlers, come in and help out. And just from the get-go, he made wrestling seem so special, and he just wanted to be part of the Glenbard North wrestling program.
What is it you think he did to give that culture, that identity to the program?
I don't know. I mean, well, I do know. I mean, like I said, he made it when he talked about it. It was important. It was special. It was what you really wanted to do. It was, and even though Glenbard North wasn't winning state championships or anything at that time, you felt like they were. Like they were headed in that direction. They were winning. I think they had one losing season, we had one losing season in the whole 50 years, and that was maybe his first or second season. So he wanted to win dual meets. He was about the individual and wanted to win conference titles and things like that, but he wanted to win dual meets, and that before dual meets were as important as they are now.
You hear that, folks? 50 years, one losing record. That's the kind of program we're talking about here. And when you retired, there were just you and Coach Falk were the only coaches, right?
Right. And that's pretty special over 50 years, and having only 2 head coaches. That's pretty cool.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, when you wrestled, you also played football, and then you ended up coming back and being an assistant with the program. What kind of a specimen was Mike Palazzo back in his heyday?
Well, in terms of that era, Mike Palazzo was he was a stud. He was a tough one. I mean, for us to have a sophomore be a state qualifier back then, that didn't happen that often. To have and he was a sophomore state qualifier, and that was what I was inheriting. I was inheriting Mike Palazzo as a junior, and so he was my stud. If you want, I mean, I could talk days on Mike Palazzo, but he was what kind of catapulted me taking over. He's what got our program going. Our Glenbard North wrestling was good, was really tough, through the 70s and early 80s when Bob was there. But then the last year or two, it kind of went down a little bit because he was going to get out. I don't know. I can't put a finger on it. And then it took a while to get it back. And Mike Palazzo was was what got it started. Everybody looked up to Mike Palazzo.
He's been on the show before, and I love that guy. Didn't realize he was a Glenbard North guy until he got on here, and everyone knows him for Lake Highland Prep. But it's funny to hear you say though that during that era, state qualifier as a sophomore, that was something, and it is. But at the end of your career, you were coaching the likes of Tony Ramos, where the guy's never been anything in the state finals. So it's like the advancement in the wrestling has come so far.
It has, and it has to do, of course, it has to do all the clubs and the youth wrestling and everything that's going on. 365 days a year wrestling. That's what's changed it. But you think back, there were some really, really good wrestlers that had they had the training that these guys had, who knows?
Right.
But Mike Palazzo was definitely a leader in our program.
I was going to ask you what about him that, impacted the team so much? Was it his leadership or attitude or?
Well, he was one of those, he was a leader, he wasn't a guy that would say a lot in the room so much, but he was a leader because because of how hard he worked. If there was an opportunity to wrestle, Mike Palazzo was there wrestling. He was, one of the first guys that, even though he was a physical specimen to begin with, he did lifting and things like that. And he took kind of young guys under his wing. And that's how he got, even though you don't know the name, but Tony Ramos, who was a leader for me after Mike Palazzo looked up to him. And then, Tony Ramos begot a couple other leaders. That's how the program had Mike Palazzo wrestled in the year 2015. He might not have ended up finishing at Glenbard North. He may have gone to another school. The way some of these wrestlers get plucked and go somewhere else, right? They don't give it out, a lot of times a program has a good wrestler as a freshman, and then he doesn't have a chance to help that program out. He goes off to another bigger name school. They don't stick, they don't stick around and give that program a chance. And I could name a number of situations like that have happened to some of my ex-wrestlers who took over as head coaches, and that happened to them. And so Mike Palazzo, luckily he wasn't in that era. He stuck through it, even though when we weren't as good as we could have been. And he's what really helped get our program going in that era. Yeah.
And it's like, man, to hear, and folks who don't know, all the great guys you've coached, the list goes on, but everyone knows Tony Ramos, and he was amazing. In my era, when I was just getting into the IKWF, Joe Gomez was a scary individual, and that guy was like, poof, my man, what a killer. And then now, obviously Austin Gomez. I don't know if you were did you coach Austin as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh my, he's so fun to watch at Wisconsin. Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm so happy he came back. That was like, I'm happy for him. You want to talk about Austin Gomez? We could talk about him for a long time.
Let's get into it. Let's talk about it.
There's a guy that he was if you want to talk about one of the, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, probably the toughest wrestler, the best leader, I've had some great ones. And Tony Ramos was a great leader. Joe Gomez was a great leader. Mike Plaza was a great leader. But Austin Gomez, you can count the bad days in the room that on one hand that he had in 4 years. He'd come in that room and bust ass every day. He was he never bitched about, I'm sorry,
you can swear, it's okay.
He never bitched about anything. He was just a hardworking, tough guy that just walked his talk. And I watched him, at the Clash, when he was going senior year, when he was, undefeated, lose a match. And his father, Hector, not an easy guy to live with, caught him behind the bleachers and just yelled at him. And a lot of guys would have walked back over here, put a sweatshirt on and hid. And he stepped up right up there to the seat and helped coach the rest of the guys. That's the kind of guy he was. he took losses in stride and didn't and learned from them and moved on. And that's what you should do.
Yeah, that kid, I mean, ever from a young age, he's probably been working just at a level that most people can't even understand.
Yeah, he has. But, and here's, I mean, we, again, could talk about this kind of stuff, but, a lot of guys that start at a young age and work at a high intensity program like Gomez Wrestling is, a lot of guys get maybe burnt out or used to loafing or we call it in our room screwing the pooch. They go through the motions. Austin wasn't one of those guys. He didn't learn how to loaf. He learned how to work hard. And he came in our room and worked even harder. And one of the, if you ever said, is a guy going to make it in college? Because many guys don't. I would say Austin Gomez is going to definitely make it in college because he's going to take that work ethic there. And I'm glad he finally got with the program that he feels comfortable with.
It's rare to see that kind of team aspect of a leader, because some great wrestlers, they won't give other guys the time of day and they're a little selfish in the room. But Austin sounds like he was like the opposite of that. Just go and go.
He was. I mean, he was. But don't get me wrong. His circle was. I mean, he was trying to get Austin Gomez as good as he could, but he was a team guy as well. And I can point to so many things over the 4 years that he's wrestled there, how he was a team guy and how he helped out the program. And so anyway, we've had some really great ones at Glenbard. So and you get me on somebody else, I can talk about them too. So
well, that clash story was awesome. Do you have any other ones on Austin Gomez that come to mind while we're on the?
No, I do. His freshman year, we had two good 106 pounders, Austin Gomez and Kirk Johansson, and they both wanted to wrestle 106. And Kirk was, I believe at that time, was a junior, and Austin was a freshman. And they challenged off the first night in our black and gold scrimmage, and Austin lost. And Kirk was a little bit bigger than Austin, and so I made the decision that in the first tournament, Kirk was going to wrestle 106, Austin was going to wrestle 13. Austin was small. But I said, for dual meet purposes, we're going to flip you guys and go that way. And then we'll let you challenge off a couple more times for the Dvorak, and then for the regional. Well, Austin wins the Dvorak, wins the wrestle off of the Dvorak, but when it comes to the regional, Johansson won. So Austin, he's a small 106 pounder, had to go 113. And his dad and his uncle were just livid. But it was the fair way to go because these both guys were both varsity starters, both varsity studs. But Austin took it into and went ahead as a small 106 pounder, went and took third and stayed at 113 and didn't blink. I mean, he just that's the kind of guy he was.
He took third. How did your guy do at 106?
He took fourth or fifth. He wasn't I didn't choose him.
Not your guy, but yeah.
They're both my guys.
Yeah.
That was a tough.
What kind of pressure from the parents were you getting in that situation, Coach?
Hector wanted him to just sit out, not, because he was pissed, and I understand it, but you can't. They knew going in. Everybody knew we were only going to challenge a few times, so everybody knew that. But it was, and luckily the Hector and Fran believe in the program, and I'm sure I was cussed out a few times at the house, but it worked out.
It's fair, and that's the great thing about a wrestle off. Now I got to ask, did Austin win the Dvorak that year?
No, he lost to O'Connor.
Wow, that's how tough Illinois is, people. We're talking about two legends right here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think he took third that year.
O'Connor,
so,
NCAA champion. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you know who beat him at state at 113? Because I don't remember.
Oh yeah, I would. I do. It's just going to take me a little bit to think of it, but another stud.
No problem. No problem. No problem. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. I can't even imagine how many more of those you have. Now, has there ever been a guy who walked into the program with as much confidence as Tony Ramos?
Yeah, I would, Joe Gomez, Austin Gomez, I would say they had a lot of confidence, but Tony Ramos is a special guy.
What? I mean,
I pulled out more of my hair from coaching Tony over the first 3 years. He was kind of a thorn in my side. He was a stud. He's a thorn in my side for a couple of years. He's a tough guy to have sometimes in the room. He would challenge me. But our senior year, and I got a story, I've got plenty of stories about him, but senior year, he really became, a great leader for us and understood what the program was all about. But I'll just give you a real quick story about Tony. We used to have a rule. That where cutting weight, you'd have to come in on Mondays, no more than 7 pounds over. And if you were over, every 10th you were over, you have to run an extra lap on the track after practice, after everything was done. And so, on Tuesdays it was 5 pounds. So you gradually get down. If you had a tough time with your weight. Well, over Christmas, came in, so you get 7 pounds. And we had the Dvorak class coming up. He came in 15 pounds over. So 8 pounds over, 8.2 pounds over the 7 pounds. So a Christmas practice is usually a longer practice anyway. Then afterwards, I had to sit there and watch him run 82 laps on a damn track. And Tony didn't exactly break the speed record doing it. He thought I was going to give in. Like I was going to say, after a couple miles, yeah, you're good enough. We were there for hours running. He had to do all 82 laps. And he still tells that story.
I love how you hold the line, Coach.
Well, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But that you have to. We had our headbutting times. We had a show who was the coach at that time.
What do you think made him such a dominant Illinois wrestler back in his era?
Well, he had a lot of experience, and he had a lot of belief in himself, and he had he had a great work ethic too. He just, like I said, he was cocky, he was young, but he if there was a chance to wrestle, he'd wrestle. He wrestled on every big stage, and went to Izzy. Went to our club, went to Izzy's club, went to, did everything he was supposed to do to get better. And, and of course, his brother, it wasn't a bad thing to have Vince in the room with him to wrestle with, and to have his brother Frank as one of our coaches. Frank, the guy that said he was going to bring his brothers to Glenbard North after he wrestled for us, and he did. Frank was actually like their guardian for 4 years. And that's a hard thing for a 26-year-old man to do.
And you got to believe that there was no one more recruited than 8th grade Tony Ramos coming out of the IKWF. So every Catholic school within 100 miles was taking him out.
And one in particular, but
it's pretty shocking that's the pull of the Glenbard North program, though, right? People like, my kids are wrestling here. They're so serious about wrestling for that program.
Yeah, I like I said, Frank was a man of his word and said he told me he was going to do it. I don't know if it's something that I did when he wrestled for me. Frank was one of my studs when he was there, but he was a man of his word, and he came there. They came there, both his brothers, and we had some tough times, through that, but they really, helped our program, and that. But our program, I don't want to think Glenbard North Wrestling is just about the studs we had, because Glenbard North is a program. The guys that make the bulk of our program are the guys that are there for 4 years that aren't the studs. I could tell hundreds of stories about those guys too.
I love how you call them the show horses and the plow horses. Like, because you're big on, as much as people from the outside might look in and think you may be doing some like recruiting and all that. And I don't know if there is or isn't, but really you guys are a program that's known for taking guys and saying, hey, if you stick with us for 4 years, by the time you're a senior, you'll win 30 matches. You're going to go downstate. Like, you're big on program development with those guys.
Exactly. That's what our program is. You know, we've got guys that start out as a freshman and don't even start in our freshman room. We have 4 levels. We wrestle 4 levels at Glenbard North, and our freshman team wrestles in a different room. And we've got guys that didn't even start as freshmen that end up being our varsity starter or state qualifier as a senior. And that's what our program is built on. We've got guys that don't even start as a senior, but then when we wrestle in the dual meet state championship, knock off state place winners. Honestly, we've got stories where I got in Joe Michelson goes out against, and I can't remember the damn team, but I can picture him, and goes. I think it was Muhammad back when Muhammad was on our level. Goes out against a state place winner from Muhammad Seymour, and pins him because this guy was a crazy JV wrestler with a cradler, and he goes out and pins him. We've got all kinds of stories like that. So
on any given Saturday in a January, Glenbard North is fielding 4+ teams.
Oh, there's some Saturdays where we've gone 5 different places. We have anywhere on certain years, we've got anywhere from 80 to 120 kids in our program. Wrestling 4 or 5 levels, and that's how we get our, but I said this many times, if you put in one room, only the wrestlers that lived and died for wrestling, we'd have about 8 guys from those 100 guys in that room. The rest of the guys are kind of part-timers, but they're guys that contribute just as much, So, because if you're going to be a dual team, if you're going to win dual team, if you're going to win duels, the number one thing that Falk told me is you can't forfeit. Can't forfeit weights if you want to win duels.
Fact.
And that's why it's important. And we pride ourselves on not having to forfeit weight classes. So then that's
wow. So if you have the 4 levels in your room, how many times a week are you going? Are you doing 2-a-days? What was the structure when you were running the show?
It depends what phase we're in. What
are the phases?
We got 5 phases. We start at the beginning preseason. Right before we start competing. Then the first 3 or 4 weeks of competition. Christmas is a phase, and then the toughest phases are phase 4, and then phase 5 is where we back off, and we concentrate on the big meets because I remember we used to be really tough, something right around January, and then somewhere around February, sometimes we wouldn't do as well as we should, and the idea is we were pushing too hard at the wrong time. You got to learn. It's like what they do in swimming. Where they back off for the big meet. Is what they do in track. And I actually got the idea from the head girls track coach at Glenbard North, Dave Burtis. We talked about it one night at a bar. We just sat there talking because he had coached wrestling when I first got there for Falk, and he was saying, "Well, you guys burn guys out by the end of the year. You guys are," and we started talking about what the difference between track and wrestling. And so then I kind of got this idea about the phases and backing off at the end of the year, working really hard in January. That's when we're doing double practices every day. We're working them hard. We're going to look like crap in January.
Double mat practices or like double workouts?
No. Mornings would be 2 days a week, run and lift, 2 days a week, hard run. We have these things called 3-lappers that the kids hate, but we feel like it gets them in great shape, gets them that minds more than great shape, gets them mentally tough because they have to push for that time and make these times and so on. And they hate it. I've heard one guy say before, he said one guy told me when we were in a Hall of Fame banquet, he goes, when I was picking up Wayne, he goes, I said to him, I go, you know, Wayne, if we crash our car into that building over there, we wouldn't have to go do 3 lappers this morning. That's how much they hated to do those things. But
how many times around would you send them on the 3 lapper? I mean, like how many reps of that? Like 10 reps of that, or
we try to simulate a 6-minute match with overtimes. So they have to do these 3 lappers. They're not really 3 lappers. They get more and more as it goes. Starts out as 3. You're trying to do these many laps, and you're trying to get a full out go for 2 minutes. And so we do 3 periods of 2 minutes, then we do a 1 minute overtime, then we do 3 30-second overtimes with a warm up and a cool down. So when they're done with that, they're dog tired. And
exhausted.
Yeah, and it's, like I say, it's more mental toughness. It's not more, it's physical, but it's more mental toughness. It's more a team thing, because if we don't make the time, if someone doesn't make the time, we all do an extra one. It's things like that.
Has that happened before?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh my, that's awesome, man. Those had to be, just the intensity's high. People are sweating. It's late January. It's dark out. Like, that's just grind sessions.
It's fine. Yeah, they're getting there at North at 5:45 in the morning, and on the track or in the weight room. It's tough, but and then the practice at night. At that time, at phase 4 are more intense, shorter but more intense, and no conditioning afterwards, because your conditioning is your wrestling at that time.
Now, one of my good friends is Mike Powell, and I know when he was at the helm of OPRF, they had some intense practices.
Yes.
I got to imagine inside the Glenbard North room, it's just as on the level. I mean, what's the atmosphere like during practice for you guys in that late January session?
They're tough goals. I mean, there's not a dry circle in the room. You know what I mean? Well, I'm sure like Powell has had, he's had some great teams, and I respect the heck out of Mike. I just Oak Park became a kind of like a place where everyone wanted to go for a while too. So I really respect what he's doing now.
But I think of two teams that not only were great, but teams that had like chips on the shoulder when they were out there. And Glenbard North was always one of them, where, you were in for a little bit of a scrum when you were wrestling a Glenbard North kid. And I had heard you say one time, I don't know if this is in a press release or in another interview, but like you guys aren't winning the unsportsmanlike battles out there. And I just love that you guys almost encourage that.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're got a bad rap about that. However, hey, wrestling's not one of those participation sports. I mean, you're going out there to win. And one of the things that one of our sayings is the fear is back in the black and gold, and the fear meaning not you're going to do something cheap or shove someone. The fear is that whoever's wrestling, they know they're going to be in a 6, 7, or 8.5 minute grinding match, no matter if they win or lose. And no one wants to wrestle. No one wants to do that. You want to go out there. You don't want to go out there and get ground for 8.5 minutes, or even if you're going to win, you had the toughest match of your year going against this guy. You don't want to face him again, because it's just going to be so that's what we kind of pride ourselves. We're going to go out there. We're going to fight you on every. And have we had some teams that didn't? Yeah, but most of the Glenbard North guys go out there with a chip on their shoulder.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you don't go 127-0 in conference dual meets without going out there with some aggression every time. So not only were you guys dominant in Illinois, I loved how you were one of the first teams to branch out of state. You've been at Clash since Clash number 1, and I'm proud to say that you guys brought the Clash title home to Illinois. And tell us about your tell us how you started going to that tournament.
we were Dvorak guys, so we'd always go to the Dvorak because that was a tough tournament. And guy's name was Randy. I can't remember his last name right now. Kept calling me up and asking me, hey, we got Coach Hahn, we've got this tournament coming up next year, and we'd like you to come to it. And just the way he was kept calling me back. I wasn't sure if I want to leave the Dvorak, but here's the reality of the Dvorak. For us, it was a really tough tournament. And you'd go over there and we'd have our 4 or 5 studs that would get great experience at it. But our guys that are more of our blue collar guys would maybe go 0-2 or 1-2, and they'd be watching for the rest of the time. So the nice thing to draw for the clash was, he goes, you're going to wrestle 6 times at this tournament. You're going to wrestle 6 matches, and everyone's going to get those 6 matches. And I started thinking about what's going to be better for our team, because we're a dual meet team. We're thinking about dual team state, and so I said, yeah, why not? Yeah, let's do that. And at going there, still thinking Glenbard North Wrestling, we're tough. We're tough as any goddamn state. Not knowing how tough. Not having an experience wrestling too many Minnesota teams or too many, Iowa teams or whatever. Goddamn Minnesota teams, they fight for every freaking point. You go to they don't give up anything easy. And so, going there and finding out how tough this was, and finding out how exhausting that those 2 days are. It's a tough tournament. And to say we won it and knocked off Apple Valley, really didn't realize what we were doing when we knocked off Apple Valley, because I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it until after we did. But knocking off Apple Valley that year, that made it kind of special.
That was huge. That's the
been a great
2001 for folks counting. And we talked about some of the guys on that team, but I was looking at who made the all clash team in 2001, and Joe Gomez, Tyler Williams were on that list, and it's no surprise.
Right.
So, but let's go back to day one of the tournament. Do you remember who you drew? Who were some of the stud teams back then?
We drew you're asking I should have Tony LaFonte, my assistant, or one of my assistants. He's the historian and knows everything.
Well, the reason I'm asking is, didn't you guys get beat though in the pool, and you still
got beat? We got beat the second day by Owatonna. Owatonna beat us. So what it was at first. Now there's 32 teams. There's 4 brackets of 8. But when we went there the first time, there was only 20 teams. So the first day you were in brackets of 4. All right. So you had a small tournament of 4-team tournaments. We only wrestled twice the first day. We beat a Nebraska team. We beat I don't know who the else we beat. We had no problem winning that. Then we got in the winter. So then all 5 4-team bracket winners got put in Pool A. We had Owatonna, Apple Valley, the team from Utah.
Sanderson's team. Heber City?
Yes. Team from California, Vacaville, and us. So Owatonna, Apple Valley, Vacaville, and the Utah team and us. And so you're going to wrestle 4 times that day at that level.
Bloodbath.
We had Owatonna. We won our first 2 duels and against Vacaville and the Utah team. And then we went against Owatonna and we lost. And then we had a bye. So we got a bye right before we had to wrestle Apple Valley. Apple Valley beat Owatonna. And then we came back and we beat Apple Valley. And somehow we ended up, I don't know what the criteria was, we ended up winning the whole thing. But the Apple Valley was we moved a couple guys around for that. And I can't exactly remember the move, but we moved and it worked out. So.
And you guys went for long time to the clash, right?
Yes.
I think
we missed a couple of years. We missed 2 years because Palazzo brought us down to Florida to wrestle there in 2012 or 13, one of those years.
Got it. And I don't even know the number, but how many times you guys went to state or took 3rd or took 4th? It's just insane. But 2011, you bring home the gold, take out Carl Sandberg in the semis. Was that enemy number one for you guys, or was it like an OPRF or a Montini or like a Mount Carmel? Who was the enemy number one?
Oh, that year. Well, I mean, that year, but almost every year. I mean, we bumped heads more with Carl Sandburg than anybody else. You know, that when we got into the state duels, we ended up losing to them quite a few times. You know, and some of them were so darn close you could just taste it. I mean,
really?
I could, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
what years were you guys right in there where it could have gone either way?
Well, I mean, it was Caitlin Chase's junior year.
Okay, 2005 then, because she was a freshman when I was an 8th grader.
Okay, and we were in the. Let me just tell you this story. They had the state champion 103 pounder, and Caitlin Chase was just a stud. But when she put someone on their back, they didn't come off. So and I can't remember the kid's name from Sandburg that was a state champ. 6'3" pounder or a state runner-up, one of the two. She threw him and got him in a headlock, threw him, had him on his back, and he was flat as hell. However, she had a drop of blood on her lip, a little bit of blood on her lip, and the ref stopped the damn match to do it. She wasn't bleeding. It wasn't like it was a gush or anything. They stopped it because they didn't want to see a goddamn girl from Glenbard North pin. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced of that. So,
were you going ballistic when they stopped the match?
Oh, hell yes. I was going ballistic.
It was
crazy. And that was the difference in the match. We had a couple other places where we could have won, but that was the difference. It was only a 1 or 2 point. It was a 1 or 2 point loss, you know. And there was another place we could have won it, but that was the one right there. So then the guy came back and he beat Caitlin by 1 or 2.
I was thinking. I knew it's the guy I was thinking of, wasn't it? But it's Michael McCullough from Orland Park Sandburg. Yeah, he beat Cradaville in the finals that year. I just pulled up the bracket.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, girls wrestling now, you know, it's saving wrestling at the collegiate level. It's amazing. And Caitlin Chase, though, man, when she was coming up, the only girl that I knew that wrestled and made the state tournament against all boys at 103 at least once, maybe twice. I mean, she was incredible. If she was wrestling now, she would be freaking world champ, wrestling at Iowa, all of it.
Yeah. She was a stud. I mean, you know what? You know, this was totally new. So I guess I was way ahead of my time having a girl in my room wrestling. That added a whole new set of problems. You know, not problems, but you know what I'm saying? It was a different experience.
Yeah.
But most of the guys, you know, it worked out. It was fine with, but there were a couple that weren't.
Yeah. No, I mean, she and her brother Jimmy Chase, also a stud. Man, so there's just so many fun names to talk about. But so in 2011, when you guys drew Sandburg in the semis, was that one of those years you were knowing it could come down to the end, or you're feeling pretty good about yourselves when you guys finally won it?
Oh, we knew a Sandburg match. This was in the semis, of course. You said that, I guess. We knew the Sandburg match was going to be close because they had already beat us that year. Wow. They had already beat us in December. So here's the deal. We knew we had a great team coming back. We knew what we had. We knew what was out there, and we felt we could win a state championship. You know, I mean, we had a meeting in the summer. We always have a meeting in the summer. And one of the things that I asked them, I said, I know we're talented enough to win it. Are you guys mentally tough enough to win it? Are we tough enough to win? And you know, that was kind of our goal. So we started the season. We were just punishing teams. You know, Oak Park, Manuka. You know, any Nequa, any of the tough teams, the traditional tough teams, we didn't have a close match. We were beat them by 20, 30 points, seriously. And we always had the Christmas meet against Sandburg. And so, but I did notice that our work ethic in the room had gotten a little, we weren't going at it like we were at the beginning of the season. We went against Sandburg and we ended up losing by 10 points. And I brought him in the room afterwards, and I was pissed. And I said, "Hey," I said, "who can tell me what was our motto this year?" And not one guy in that room could remember what the motto of the meeting was. Not one guy, not one.
Yikes!
John Marmaleo, who was a freshman, who wasn't even in the meeting, at the meeting tried to say something. He came out with something silly, but and so I said, here, well, the question, remember I asked you, you're talented enough, but are you tough enough to win a state championship? And I said, I've noticed in the room, you guys haven't been going at it hard. You haven't been working as hard as you've been kind of like living on your big wins and thinking you're just going to coast through this whole thing. And so then we kind of recommitted to, are we tough enough? And, we finished the year off, we lost to a couple teams at the Clash. We lost to
Bettendorf?
We lost Bettendorf, and we lost to Brandon, Florida that year at the Clash. And then that was it, I think, as far as who we lost to. Those were our 3 losses that year. And we went to the state meeting. We ended up, Sam, we're getting past Sandburg. I knew if we made a little bit of a switch here, we could do that as long as our guys step up and actually
held up.
That's so tough,
Now, when I think about Glenbard North, a couple other things I got to ask you about. Number one is Gold Dot Nation. That's number one that comes to mind.
Okay.
Is there any meaning behind that, or what's the how did that all come about?
There's a lot of meaning behind that, but sorry, Ryan, you're not.
I know. I want to over tell me.
So there's nothing I really can tell you about it except that it's,
it's real. It's there.
It's been around for a while. It's on every T-shirt, uniform, and everything that we have. It's even on my barn in Carroll Street.
Would you say it's a philosophy or what?
That's a Glenbard North wrestling thing.
Love it. Love it. I love it. I knew I wasn't going to get it out of you, but I had to ask.
Yeah. Well.
It's funny. It reminds me of whenever I interview a Twisters guy, I've had Coach Quinn on here. I'm like, to get a Twisters t-shirt, I'd kill for it. And they go, only Twisters get them. So I get it. Every program's got a little mystique to it.
Yeah.
So the other thing I think of when I think of Glenbard North wrestling is some really strong feeder programs, like the Ville Lombard Cougars back in the day were killers. Gomez Wrestling Academy. Is that something you were structuring and were helping kind of develop, or how did that kind of all come about?
I wish I could say that. I did. We had Carroll Street Park District Wrestling when I first took over. So that was our feeder group. And Jim Considine, whose son, Augie, played football and wrestled. And then Andy, his youngest son, was going to be a freshman in our program. I knew Jim from Ville Lombard, and he was, at that time, Ville Lombard was one of the, if not the best, one of the best kids programs in the state. And they were working at Glenbard East for a while, and they really helped that program. Then they went to Glenbard West, and they were helping that program really started getting better. And I know Jim and I were at our favorite bar, Frank's, one night after a wrestling meet, and we started talking about him coming over to Glenbard. We bringing the club over there, and whether it was, we kind of there was things that I wanted to change the colors to black and gold. I wanted him to change the name of it. He didn't want to do that, and I understand. And so we agreed, and that was one of the best things we've ever done for the program, is bring those guys over there.
So they were practicing out of your. Even though they were called the Ville Lombard Cougars,
yes.
They still practice. Okay. Gotcha.
Yes, and I can't exactly remember the year. Jim would know that, but yeah, that was a great move for us to get them in there. And then out of Ville Lombard, Hector used to be coaching with Ville Lombard. Hector started his own club, and
Got it.
We got there's a lot of good guys that came out of that program as well.
The artist formerly known as Phil Lombard is now Gomez. There's so many of those in Illinois where like someone spins off, or
well, actually there was 2 clubs. We had 2 clubs for a while.
Really?
Oh yeah, Phil Lombard, and it wasn't a great breakup.
Well, I can't imagine it was a clean split.
No, it was not. It was not. And so that's, as a head coach, and you've got 2 programs that two clubs that don't like each other at this point. That makes it's a little hard. You got to walk a tightrope, to not offend anybody.
Right.
Well,
we've talked about a lot of your greats, and I know a lot of the workhorses. They know who they are. They helped you guys put together one of the most incredible streaks in high school wrestling. Not to mention all the state chips, but the undefeated conference record for your entire coaching career is unheard of. But I did just want to close the loop on a guy that was just legendary when I was really young coming up, Joe Gomez. Is that Austin's cousin or brother?
Well, it's his cousin, but,
okay.
but he's more like a brother because Hector basically adopted Joe when he was young.
Got it.
So Hector raised Joe.
And, was his approach similar to Austin's, or what kind of wrestler was he compared to Austin?
A little different. Joe was just, you want to talk about it. I've never seen people when they saw someone get on a scale and were just so afraid. Their opponents were afraid of Joe. I mean, Joe was kind of like a scary wrestler. He was kind of a mean, bad guy, and people didn't want to. I mean, of course, the studs weren't afraid of him, but 99% of the other guys were, and he was just a tough, hard-nosed wrestler, just a grinder, and so he's not. Austin's flashy. He's got all kinds of stuff to throw at you. Joe is a grinder,
I don't like Austin's out there. He's smiling. He's loving. He's like, he's just, I don't imagine Joe Gomez was smiling that often back then. I mean, he was a serious guy.
Not very often. Not very often.
It's funny. I wrestled at Geneseo. I graduated in 2007. One of my teammates, Nick George, who would go on to be a state finalist, lost to Albert White. His first match down at Assembly Hall one year was Joe Gomez, and it was one of the fastest pinfalls in the tournament. And I love Nick. He's in my wedding. He listens to this, but I remember sitting up there and he's like, "You ever heard of this guy?" I'm like, "I've heard of him." It's gonna be a tough go. It's gonna be a tough go. But he had like the buzz cut hair, like he was just all business.
He was a tough one. I mean, like I said, we've been blessed with some really tough guys coming in that room.
Yeah. And he wrestled one of the greats from my era, AJ Lavender, I believe, one year as well.
Yes.
And
he beat him in fresh. Wait a minute. Like I say, there's so many. He beat him 1 year. He lost him 1 year, wasn't it?
That's what I remember too. That 1 year, exactly. Yeah, I think because Joe won it as a freshman, right?
Yes, he won as a freshman and a senior.
Right. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So could have been a 4-timer, and this is old 2A, so crazy times. Wow. So ultimately when you decided to retire, I got to ask, what was it like the first season after you had retired? Was it like a little bit of regret, or were you feeling good about what you had done?
Well, the first season when I retired you're talking about when I retired from coaching, stepped down.
Yeah, we stepped down. Like your first full season that you had watched not as a coach.
Well, the first season was the darn
COVID
season.
That's right.
So
okay.
I was thanking God that I wasn't coaching at that time, because I mean, that was the hardest thing. Coach, Travis Cherry took over. That was a tough. It's tough taking over a program anyway, like Glenbard North Wrestling, but to take it over and then to go through COVID season like that. Well, we lost our whole off season. We lost everything that all the framework that Glenbard North Wrestling is built on. That doesn't make much sense, but the foundation that Glenbard North is built on is hard work throughout the year, and we lost all that. And so, and then just trying to get kids, keep communication with kids and so on. I would have gone nuts. So the first year that I was out, I knew that our team that was coming in was going to be okay, because a lot of those guys had wrestled, a lot of those seniors had wrestled varsity since they've been freshmen or sophomores. So I knew if there's a team there ever was a team that could take off the off season, not have an off season, it was that team, and they'd still be good. And they ended up, winning the conference and winning the IWCLA state championship.
Right.
And so they were a good team, but it was last year's team that got affected by not having an off season, not having a kids club, not having all this. That hurt.
Yeah.
So, I'm still helping out with the program a little bit, and we're, Travis is doing all the right things. We're, got our club going again, got the off season going, doing all this stuff, the lifting. And so, we're going to get back on track.
I mean, look out, people. Look
But
out.
It was tough. It was tough. Tough. It's tough not being used to being the head guy to not being the head guy. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that you're still involved and you're still, mentoring and working with guys, I'm sure. And, the last thing I'll ask you, Coach, is we're heading into football season here. And I know you're a guy that would used to, kind of roam the halls and would get anyone on the team. If you had to tell like a stubborn football coach or someone who wouldn't want a wrestler to come out, like what values of wrestling are you speaking to as to why you should think kids should get out and wrestle and be a part of this sport?
Well, I guess the first one that always comes in mind is mental toughness. I mean, there's not a sport. I mean, not a sport that teaches you about mental toughness more than wrestling. Because, football, you're out there with 11 other guys. You screw up, nobody knows you screw up unless you're the quarterback or the running back and you throw an interception or fumble. But no one sees a lineman that falls on his face and doesn't make his block or whatever. But if you screw up in a wrestling match, everybody sees it, everybody knows. It takes a lot of courage, takes a lot to go out there and wrestle to begin with. But then if you're not successful, it's so tough to come off that and to go back to work. Unless you are mentally tough, unless you develop mental toughness. And this is one of the sports that develops mental toughness. Talk about, the problem with youth today, they don't see enough adversity. Well, there's no sport that smacks you right in the face with adversity than wrestling. There's very few guys, not even Tony Ramos, that went out there and won every match he's wrestled, when he started. It's a tough sport. I'd say that's the number one thing to tell a football coach, and there's no wrestler that's afraid to stick his face in, and tackle somebody or hit somebody. Wrestlers aren't afraid to do that because they do that without a helmet on. Put a helmet on them, they're fearless, So we've had some great football players that were wrestlers. I mean, Brian Murphy, we haven't even talked about Brian Murphy. He was the starting quarterback on their state runner-up team.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He was a stud. He was a stud for them. He was. You talk about a leader. I could talk about Brian Murphy forever.
Is this the Brian Murphy that wrestled in Michigan? We're thinking of the same one?
Yes.
He was their quarterback.
He was their starting quarterback with Justin Jackson in there, but Brian Murphy was the starting quarterback for 2 seasons.
Wow.
A starting varsity quarterback when they were super tough. So,
man, Coach, you're getting me fired up right now. I'm ready to go. This is awesome. Well, man, it's been so fun to talk. I'm glad we could get it scheduled. Any final words before we head off here, Coach?
I just, if you were talking about Glenbard North Wrestling, it's a program, and there's a lot of people that are involved, all the assistants and all the great wrestlers that came back in that room, and all the wrestlers that wrestle. It's a program. It's been in conversation for 50 years, and I hope it stays in the conversation for another 50.
I hope so too.
Won't be around to see it, but
being an Illinois guy, it gives me a lot of pride to see programs like that. And everyone in Illinois loves seeing the teams do well, and having programs like Glenbard North just makes it so fun to watch. And man, I'm glad we could connect, and can't wait to watch the guys this upcoming season.
Thanks. Nice talking to you, Ryan.
Thank you for listening to Wrestling Changed My Life. This episode was presented by Athletic Greens. Go to athleticgreens.com/WCML to take advantage of a 1-year supply of vitamin D droplets, along with 5 free travel packs. athleticgreens.com/WCML. If you want to see more from the podcast, go to WrestlingChangeMyLife.com or follow us on Instagram at WrestlingChangeMyLife. Until next time. 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 Until next